right, mate?
Yeah. You know me, always ducking and diving, dodging and weaving. Hey up,
Yes.
bit hey, bit ho, you know.
Yes. Weaving so much, we say, get a loon, Colin. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Ah.
So, I seem to be a very strange yellow today. Honestly, I haven't been drinking too much. It just seems to be what my camera's doing.
Very Simpsons-esque, yes.
Yes. Just blue here. I think it might be because it's bright sunshine outside. And I decided to put electric light on. The marvel of modern man. Electric light.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I am so excited about this week. Yes.
I know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Was it my pick? It was my pick. You asked me.
Colin, what's up? We've been watching this week.
This week, we have been watching Dr. Terror's House of Horrors.
Ooh,
indeed. Do you want a synopsis?
Yeah, please.
It's hard. It's a hard synopsis to do because this really is a very, not unique anymore, but it was a prototype film. This is an anthology movie. And I say that with a little pinch of salt because I can't quite remember whether it is genuine anthology, as in they're all written by different people, or it is a collection of stories where they're all written by the same person. But anyway, that's by the by. Basically, we've got 5 people on a train, all men, bit of a sausage fest. And they all get into this one carriage that cannot link to any other carriages. So there's only these 5 men. And then this one person comes on at the end and says, is there room for one more in this carriage? And it's Peter Cushing gets on, the titular character of Dr. Terror. And he just, falls asleep, drops his bag. Everyone picks his bag up and he's got this pack of tarot cards. And then they all kind of have these various discussions about whether they're real or not real. And he offers the tarot cards to them. And each in turn, they are told a tale of how their future will come out. Only the 5th card will always be the death card, no matter where he puts it in the pack. It's like having a drink with Russ Brown, the way this card keeps moving around. And you've got Christopher Lee sat there, who's this kind of absolute knobhead art critic, and you've got Roy Castle, this bubbly kind of fellow, and you've got Donald Sutherland, who's there being a stoic womanizer. And you've got stories of werewolves, vampires. You've got voodoo as being one of them, and you've got the wonderful severed hand idea of retribution from beyond the grave. It's a whole smorgasbord of various terror tales, and they actually end up going, how can we all possibly die on this train carriage? Because they've already been dead the entire time. Spoilers. Because right at the end, you actually find out that they all died in the train crash, and that actually Dr. Terror himself was death. So, yeah. Was that the film you watched, Nash?
Yeah, that was one that I watched. Yes.
And what did you think of it?
I fucking love this film. This is in my, I'm not even going to say my top 10. It's in my top 3 films, I think. Maybe even my top 1. It's just one of those that you can go back to again and again and again. And it's comfort food for me, is this film. I really, really like it. But this time watching it, I was trying to be a little bit more critical whilst I was watching it.
Yes. And were you able to be more critical whilst you were watching it?
A couple of glasses of scotch in, and you can be more critical. And this one, and this, I think it allowed me to see why I enjoy this one so much, because the first story, which is the werewolfy type curse thing that's on an island in Scotland, the protagonist meets a sticky end, but it's down to a family curse. It's not through his own actions. The second one, where you've got Alan Freeman and Triffids, again, it's not down to his own actions. It's down to sort of like fate and circumstances, where he comes to a sticky end just because of the way circumstances are. Then you've got the Roy Castle one, where he's stealing music. And and he gets what happens to people who steal music.
He's appropriating it, isn't he? It's a real. We'll come to that in a second, actually.
Yeah, but he's been told by people, don't go stealing their music, don't go listening to it, and he fucks off with it and gets the good horror ending that people deserve when they're stealing things. The penultimate one, Christopher Lee gets what he deserves. He's been an arsey art critic. He's been persecuting one artist. He then, when the artist sort of like snaps back at him, he retaliates by running him over. The man's hand falls off. I'm being sort of like tiny bit glib there with it, but his hand falls off and then goes around. And yeah, Christopher Lee gets what he deserves. And then you've got the twist in the final one where it's not so much Donald Sutherland getting what he deserves, but he's sort of like fallen foul of a local competitor. Is that a fair way of saying it? So yeah, it's not that all of these are just sort of like, oh, bad person gets what they deserve, bad person get what they deserve. Yeah, there's sort of like some good people in there who they don't really deserve that, but still this shit is happening to them. And I think that kind of reflects my belief about the horror story, that it should be not just about bad people getting their comeuppance, but good people getting the comeuppance they don't really deserve.
Yeah, and I'm not going to disagree with any of that. I will say I think the first one is, yes, it's a family curse, but the curse is they stole the house off them. So there is still that, even though it's generic or generational, in terms of its curse, there is still this kind of, there is a moralistic thing underneath it, which actually suits the werewolf tale really well. I agree with completely the second one, the murderous plants. That was just fabulous the way that went about, and it's quite funny watching stuff like that, which was made before we landed on the moon.
Yeah,
because the science in it is very ropey. It kind of shows what you could get away with science-wise. The idea, I'm looking at this cell. My God, it's a brain, because it looks exactly the same as a human brain. But on a micro scale, this plant's got brains. Yeah, it's it does sort of lean into the world of nonsense at times, but brilliantly leans into the world of nonsense. The Roy Castle one, which is a little problematic in some of it, which kind of links to the attitudes of the time, one could be kind and say. But it does actually, when you think about it, it does lay the question down about appropriation of other people's cultures and how we appropriate from other people's cultures. What is the difference between, this jazz guy who's been told, don't use the music from this voodoo festival, that just goes off and uses it because he thinks that nobody's going to hear it. That's, in one way, it's advancing the jazz form because he's adding this voodoo sound. Therefore, it's okay, but then it's not okay because it's appropriation, and the god wants his royalties, and comes and gets them, in spades. And the art critic one is, you're right. It's,
Poor choice of words, seen in spades.
Well, yeah, for the voodoo one. Yeah. Actually, no, you're right there. It gets it back in troves.
Yes, much better, yeah.
And the art critic one, that's the art critic one is absolute classic horror. And I can honestly say, when I'm watching them, I remember the Roy Castle one, but I didn't remember it being as problematic as it was at certain times. Yeah. And I did remember them. You remember them, but you kind of don't remember them being so a little bit naff, which, in the way that they're made. The art critic one with Christopher Lee, that obviously sat in my head really, really strongly from when I first saw that when I was younger, so much younger than today. The way the hand was crawling across the floor. Honestly, I have memories. I was thrown all the way back to that little council flat in Hollandbury, just north of Brighton, watching that film on a horror double bill in the late 70s. Just that hand moving around. And even I sat down, we were watching it with Heather, my wife, and you sat there watching it and you're having a bit of a giggle. It's really enjoyable. But then the hand turns up again, and there was an audible, "Oh my God, it's back!" You know, the way that story works is really powerful. I think it still lands today.
Yeah, and it's almost biblical, isn't it? Sort of like the artist having his hand removed, and there's the eye for an eye thing.
Yeah.
And there's all of those wonderful details that are going on in there.
Yes.
So the appropriation that we've got in the Roy Castle one, because when we were watching it, I was saying to Tracy that I think the Roy Castle story in that might be my favourite one in there.
A story, yeah.
Yeah, as you said, there's an awful lot of problematic stuff because there's sort of like the accents, which Jim Davidson wouldn't even touch nowadays.
Especially when he says he's going off to the West Indies and then actually uses a Pakistan accent. It's like,
yeah,
what are you doing?
It has got all of those issues, but also the music in it is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
The score that's been written for that is just wonderful to hear. And yeah, when he goes on to sort of like the jazz voodoo part of it, it actually makes it all the more compelling, as though, I'm actually hearing something that has been created from a voodoo ceremony.
Yeah. And there's lots of that goes on with, and actually it does tie in a lot with this film was made in 1965. Right. So in the middle of the 60s, you got the jazz thing going on. There is, people used to call it jungle music, that was with the rock and roll and all that kind of stuff. So the whole kind of racism and music thing lies on top of each other. And in a way, however much part of that, the way it's shot is quite problematic from its time, it is actually still doing a message of appropriation and racism. So the people that are being racist are having their comeuppance. It's just that the way the film is made, especially when the god walks off at the end, it's kind of a little bit, all right, a bit stereotypical in that kind of way. But it is trying, for a film in 1965, it is actually trying to put that kind of moralistic message over in that kind of, like, these are other people's cultures. This is their religion. This is not just something that we can judge offhand. This is the life that these people lead in these other countries, and that I thought was a really good message that got across in that Roy Castle one.
And it's, as I say, that's the first one where the protagonist gets their comeuppance. They get what they deserve.
Yes.
Yeah, and it feels quite fitting because, as you said, he's cheerful and he's so likable in that.
Yes.
He has a bit of a giggle about the tarot cards. He makes a couple of mother-in-law jokes about sort of like the spooky cards that he sees there. Peter Cushing says, "Oh, you shouldn't talk about tarot cards like that." But still, we think, he's got a winsome grin on his face.
But he's incredibly disrespectful, and that's the weird. That's even in the carriage. His characterization is one of really disrespectful for other people's cultures.
Yeah,
even to the point that he's a jazz musician. When you actually think about that, the jazz comes from black culture. It comes from the jazz and blues culture out of America. And he's a white jazz musician that doesn't even consider the cultural heritage of where it comes from. He just likes it as music. And, I'll just change the middle bit of it. And everyone's getting blown away because this strange supernatural wind has ripped the club apart. Nah, forget all that. Because what we're actually doing is, he is very narcissistic, but not in a nasty way, which is really interesting to see. You don't see characters written like that anymore. If you're narcissistic, you're nasty and gaslighting. Where he's actually, like you say, he's lovable. He's not even a lovable rogue. He's lovable, but is completely naive of the cultural problems that go on around what he's actually doing. And it's very, very. Well, if it's intended, it's very clever.
That's also the only part in it where we get any meta level within this film, because when he's running away from the club to go back home, he comes on a poster for Dr. Terror's
House of Horrors,
which is a lovely touch. It's just sort of like
better than the meta bloody ham-fisted meta ending of the Vampire Story. That was terrible. The whole story I really liked, and it's very obvious what's going on, and rubber bats flying around the place is always quite good fun, and this idea that that he's married a vampire and doesn't know she's a vampire, brilliant, really like that, and then the point where you suddenly go, oh, hang on, it's the Doctor, and the whole manipulation, to get him arrested and get it out, but to then look down the lens of the camera and go, can't have too many doctors or vampires. It was so bloody go and hit people around the head with the baseball bat of metafiction. It was terrible, that breaking the fourth rule.
Yeah, I've got to admit that was my least favourite one out of the whole 5.
I don't mind the story. I just hated the ending of it. I just didn't like the way it concluded.
I suppose I see that one as having issues because we just before that was the Christopher Lee one, and as you say, there's that hand that's creeping along, and there were 3 of us watching it, and we were saying, do you know, to say that this is 57 years old, the whole idea that you've got special effects in a film that still look so effective. We were going, yeah, the special effects are still quite good in this. And then it goes to the vampire story and there's the rubber bat on strings. And it's just, all right, forget what I was saying about the special effects being wrong. This is just sort of like told it, the drag factor of this one.
Yeah, it's just, even when she gets the stake in her and she's, I was in tears with laughter when the police came into the room and she's lying on the bed with the stake in her. That was, bigger than it was before he stuck it in her. That was the bit that,
That's how it works, though, sometimes, isn't it? There was that. And as you say, sort of like when he's breaking the fourth wall and staring at the camera, I suppose I can understand why they put that one at the end. But also, I thought Donald Sutherland was kind of weak in that role as well. I mean, as an actor, he's matured and coming along. And he's considerably more sophisticated now. So when he's playing President Snow in the Hunger Games, in that case, you think, he's a dark and sinister character. And they're just, I'm a doctor. Here's my vampire wife. Oops, I've cut my finger on the tin opener, which I'm not fucking... Did you see the way he was trying to open that tin?
Yeah, he really was opening it in a really... Actually, a word just went through my head there, which I refuse to use. Rhymes with Chaz. About it, the way that he was actually using it was sort of like.
For anybody who's not watched it yet, he cuts his thumb and goes, "Ouch!" And he's got all the Kensington gore dripping down his hand from this tiny little cut. And his is she meant to be French? His wife,
yeah, I think so.
His French wife goes up and says, "Oh, let me kiss it better." Now, any bloke in the real world would sort of like say, "Oh, it's not the only place where I've got a cut love." But no, he's just there and letting her...
If you're going to suck that hard on my cut, that's what they're saying, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah. So, that one didn't work quite as well for me, but that doesn't let it down because there's been so much strength within the whole thing. And there's some good aspects within that one anyway. The plant one is kind of a scary idea, really, isn't it?
Brilliant. It's really, really good. I did have a bit of Mandela effect with it because I remember the child being eaten by the plant. I was obviously wrong. I've mixed that up with something else and then thought, but it would have been great, wouldn't it? Of course, they would never do that in 1965. But that whole idea of the child playing outside and then she turns around and the actual thing in that kind of almost 1979 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers just clasping round her and, absorbing her in, I thought was quite interesting.
With the child actor there, I thought she was shite.
It was almost serving a purpose. The thing was, I didn't notice how bad she was because of the science. That was the way that they were talking about. Well, evolution is obviously the ability to be able to protect yourself from danger. It's 1965, guys. I know that you knew more about it then, but the writer just obviously couldn't be asked doing any research.
No, that's what Darwin said. Darwin said it's the
protection of the species.
Yeah, from danger. Definitely mentioned, yeah. No, her acting was so wooden, and she sort of like when she was, and also, did you hear the sound effects for the dog?
Yes. Woof, 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 woof.
For anybody who's thinking of going to watch this after, or if you've already watched it, just go back and listen to that, because that's not a dog barking, and I don't know how difficult it can be to get a recording of a dog barking.
It doesn't matter even if it isn't. It's the most human sounding bark I've ever, because he actually says bark, 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 like that. Not it's bark, bark, bark.
Oh, that was, yeah, that was. But that didn't detract because, yeah, the whole idea that plants are going to take back the whole planet. I like that. Plants deserve, yes.
I'm gonna sit there and say I think they just blew the budget on the cast. I mean that 1965, you got Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Donald Sutherland was actually a rising star at the time. It's not like one of his first films.
Yeah.
You got you got what's his face? You know, the DJ fella. They've obviously Alan Freeman. They dragged him into it, and Roy Castle was again one of the reasons they wanted him. He was a rising star.
Yeah,
they put all these characters in. It's almost like they go, right, we've got it's like a film that was designed and made by an agent because they're all on his books.
Yeah,
and he wanted something to advertise them with. So it was kind of like, what can we do? Oh, and then they go back to the old comics, because if you're looking at pre-comic code type comics, you know, where you got your Tales from the Crypt type stuff going on, and they've gone to those and they've looked at those simplistic versions of those horror stories, and they've tried, and it's the first version of that on film, and that's something I really do want to emphasize here. This actually is really one of the first of this type of film ever made. You know, nobody had made an anthology movie like this before, so it was really cutting new ground.
There's one, and it's a black and white one, and it might be, there could be stories in there from H.G. Wells, and I think maybe something from W.W. Jacobs. I'm going to have to try and find out the name of it. But yeah, but you're right, this is one of the very, very early ones. That one was in black and white, so I'm fairly sure that one was older.
Let me just type into this thing here. Anthology movie. All right, let's have a look. Intolerance 1916, Grand Hotel 1932, If I Had a Million. Yeah, so there were Dead of Night is really where you start coming in, and Flesh and Fantasy, when you start getting the horror ones. But even then, they were one or two stories. They didn't link in the same way that this one did, with a singular character that brings it all together, with that twist at the end. Yeah.
What did you think to the artist or the critic?
I love that story. I adore that story. There's something about that one that really did sit in my head. I remember every single detail of that one, you know, over the others. When we sat down to watch it, and as soon as I saw Christopher Lee sat in that thing, it was like, oh, no, hang on. This is that one with the art critic. So the whole thing, like you say, losing the hand. You know, the idea that these two, and they're both quite vile people, actually. You don't feel sorry for the artist, and you don't feel sorry for the critic, because they're absolutely horrid to each other. You know, one's horrid one way. As soon as he does the monkey gag on him, you think there's his comeuppance. And then he drives it home and drives it home and drives it home until he has to, you know, sort of break the guy. So there's, you know, I have no sympathy for that. And then when he loses his hand, it's that whole, yeah, the artist loses his hand, then the hand comes back, and he loses his, and it's that he doesn't die at the end of it. You know, it's lovely again. Oh, my eyes, just to, you know, obviously they didn't have the budget to show no eyes. But it was, no, I love it. I think it's really, really good as a story, because it's one of those stories where you got someone's done something evil, and now you need to ask the question, did he just imagine it? Was this just somebody going mad, or was there really a severed hand crawling around the place that jumps out the fire, that has the thrown in the lake thing that we saw in the Changeling being used as a mechanic for the rubber ball? You know, that you've thrown it away in the lake, you've put it all away, you've cut chains around it, yet it still gets out and it still chases you. later on, there's be another film called The Hand. There's a horror film called The Hand, which is completely about, someone getting a hand transplant, and they get a hand of a murderer transplanted on, and then the hand starts to want to continue killing, and that has a load of chop the hand off, and it carries on walking around, afterwards, because the hand wants to continue living. But there is something about the way that's done. I mean, yes, you can see the line of the mold down the side of it, but still, the ingenuity of that hand that could there's no wires on it. It's obviously got a motor in it that's just pulling it along. They've designed it that way. Love it. I don't know what it is about that story, but it captures something in my imagination. I think that's the whole thing with this one. If you watch this purely from a filmmaking point of view, it's rubbish. It really is terrible, down to some of the sets. I mean, even the like you say, the Triffid one, the outside of that guy's house looks so much like Shepperton Studios. It's terrible. But there are so many things that are going on that just tap into the imagination that you don't care. It's not a film that you turn off halfway through and go, oh, it's rubbish. You actually do invest in the whole premise of it, to the point where you really do suspend your disbelief in things and just go boom and go all in just to enjoy it. And I think that's where it comes from. It's not, I mean, when the film came out, it was an X. It's now a PG, right? So it kind of tells you it's more of a kids' movie. It's like I said to Heather, this is a Sunday afternoon film now, where before it was a horror double bill when I saw that. It's like you say, it has every single element. If you want to study how to write horror, you can't beat this film, because once you strip away all the terribleness of the filmmaking, what you're actually left with is 6 very, very good horror stories. You have a werewolf story that, does use the silver bullets, and the silver bullet idea didn't actually come in until the Universal Pictures, The Wolfman, but it took everything around. It was a bit like if Hound of the Baskervilles was a genuine werewolf.
Yeah.
Right? So that you've got. The vampire story, it's actually a really cute vampire story. A vampire comes into another vampire's territory, and that other vampire wants to get rid of them but doesn't want to kill them, because they think they might be a bit more powerful than me. So figures out a way of doing it by manipulation. What a great story that is. The hand, the severed hand, the haunted by your wrongdoings that you have done. The voodoo story, but not a voodoo zombie story, which is where most people will go to. An actual come and get back what is mine, because you have taken from the gods type story. And then Mother Nature runs amok. There it goes again. It's another genre. We have seen this with giant alligators. We have seen this with all the kind of creatures that go on. Mother Nature runs amok. You have got every genre there. And then you have Mysterious Stranger, which is the one in the train. 6 beautiful genres, all of them different, and all of them actually written very well in terms of the story. Just not necessarily made very well, but you don't always need that. As long as the bones of the story are very, very good, and the characters are well formed, which they are in every single one of them, however simplistic. They are 2-dimensional characters, yes, but they are formed perfectly for the stories, that they sit in your head. And I think that makes it a major success in terms of creative point of view.
Yeah, I'm 100% behind you. And I love what you say about the Roy Castle one, that they're stealing from the gods, because, ordinarily we would sort of like see that in an Indiana Jones film, where he's sort of like taking some jewel or diamond that belongs to the god, but he's stealing something as abstract as the music, which, again, I suppose that's what makes it all the more original.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's original anyway because it's a prototype, and the films that came before this. Remember this film is made before Night of the Living Dead, so we haven't had Night of the Living Dead, which is an incredibly important horror film. We haven't had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We haven't had The Exorcist. We haven't had The Omen. We haven't had the Friday the 13th. this is something that all the horror films, we're post-Dracula at this point. You know, we've had White Zombie, which is a really important horror film coming into this. You know, so the 1950s have happened, but going into the 60s, you know, people were kind of like Dracula mad. Even Heather said, as soon as Christopher Lee turned up on the screen, because of the colorization of this, she just went, "Oh, is this Dracula?" Because it looks like it's not a Hammer film. That's what you've also got to keep telling yourself. You're so tuned to this era of the 1960s being Hammer movies that you forget that other people made these kind of movies. So when you look at what was going on around in terms of horror films and what was being made, it stands out. It really is an absolute outlier for the way that it's done these things. So its originality is within the concept of what it was doing and the way it was doing it at the time. You know, it's an ensemble movie, and it is, you know, most ensemble movies were comedies back then.
And yeah, it still stands today as something that, from my point of view, can be watched and rewatched. And I think I watched it last night, and I think I'd watched it the week before as well, because my son was over, and it just happened to be on what was the Horror Channel.
Yes. Whatever they call it now, Action or whatever.
Legend, is it? Or
Legend, that's it, yeah.
So yeah, within the space of 10 days, I watched it twice. And even watching it last night, even though it's probably the 21st time I've seen it, or maybe more, there's, as you said, there's not a part where you think, "Oh, I'll turn it off now, I'm bored with it." It just still keeps being as good and enjoyable. Yeah.
And I think the major thing on that is I'm not going to say good. There's a lot about it that's not good in terms of the way it's made, because it's cheap and because of what it's doing. Enjoyable, yeah, absolutely. The enjoyment factor of this film is right up there. You know, it's everything about it is joyous.
There are some problematic areas,
yeah, but joy is just amazing. You can't help but be smiling at the end of this film. It's an enjoyable thing to watch, and it's wonderful for that. And I think for you definitely, and I think for me as well, because I've always had a soft spot for anthology style movies and anthology style books. You know, Blood Inc. is an anthology style book. Instead of me releasing it as a collection of short stories, I had to have something that linked them together. That influence goes all the way back to this movie. There's no doubt about it. You know, I did see this when I was younger. It wasn't a new film for me, and it definitely goes back to this film of where that concept of trying to have things linked together. We're doing it with the Blackpool Horror Society with their book, where everyone's writing their own story, and then I'm writing these linking points to make them all sit together. And I don't think there's enough people do that with collections of short stories in my book. I like the fact that you do that, because I think it means that you read short stories in an order. You don't just keep dipping in and out when you create those links. You make,
because this is us wanting authorial control over how people consume what we're creating. It's a nice idea that people can dip in and out, and I fancy reading something that's short, or I fancy reading something that's longer. No, fuck off. I've written this. I decide when you read it and how you read it. Yeah.
But dipping in and out, it's one of those things. The trouble is it's like I do it with albums. When I used to have to listen to albums because you had this big round piece of plastic that was on the other side of the room, and I couldn't be asked getting up to change the track. And you suddenly change that to CD, where you had this random access ability, and even more now with streaming. You know, I think there's a lot of people out there that don't listen to a full album anymore. They pick out the ones that are nice and hits. But they miss the ones in between that take a bit more work to get to like them, which is what you used to do with an album. And I think with a series of short stories, the same thing can happen. If you're dipping in and out, you might... Let's take that film. Let's take Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, for example. If you're not particularly into the vampire genre, you would just skip it and you wouldn't read it.
Yeah.
You have no reason to. But in the context of that film, you have to watch it because there's something that comes after it.
Yeah.
So, it has to relate somehow. And I think that does. It just means that you're more likely to consume more stories because of it. And
also it means that if you're there thinking, well, I can't bloody stand vampire stories, or I can't stand voodoo stories, or whichever. You have to sit through it anyway. You sit through it, you tolerate it, and you find that you've been enriched by the experience.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It makes you do stuff that it makes you do stuff that you wouldn't normally do. I mean, you asked me the question once, what books would I recommend people who want to be writers read?
Yeah.
And I say the complete opposite of what you would normally read.
Yeah.
You know, if you're into horror, go and read a romance.
Yep.
Vice versa. You know, pick up those other influences that are not within the genre that you would normally sit, or the genre you intend to write in. Go and pick up the influences from other places and bring it all into that one place, and then you end up with something more fulfilling. It doesn't have to be original. It's a fallacy that everything has to be absolutely original, but it has to have a different voice. Maybe it has to add to the conversation, and you'll only do that by bringing in other information.
Definitely agree. Definitely.
Brilliant. So we agree. Thumbs up on this one. That was brilliant.
Oh God, yes. All the thumbs up. Yeah.
All the thumbs up, and highly recommended. If you want to be a horror writer, watch this film.
Yeah.
Whether you're thinking of doing it as a screenplay, whether you want to do it as a short stories, whether you want to do it as a novel, watch this film, because it's like watching, like when I recommend Inside Number 9. You're watching it for the efficiency of storytelling at times, because you've got 5 stories, or 6 stories actually, when you include all the linking, in an hour and a half. That's really efficient storytelling in those little moments. So you can see where the dramatization might not work, but the storytelling is definitely there.
And each one of those stories works. Each one of those stories just has the right impact. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Get it seen.
Definitely.
Right. So what's next on the list? Because we're going to do more of these. We're going to kind of do an almost evolution of the anthology film. So what was next on the list?
The next one I've got downloaded, I don't know if it's the next one. Maybe I've jumped out of. I've got The Vault of Horror.
That 1971?
I thought it was 73, but maybe I've got the wrong version of it.
I should be able to find it on here actually, because it should be one of my folders. Where are they? I actually put them in this little place. We haven't downloaded them illegally, just to say that honestly, Gov, genuine, this is not evidence of any shenanigans or wrongdoings.
Honestly, officer, yes.
No, I can't find it. If it's not, anyway, look, it doesn't matter because we're doing these films. I can't see it. I don't know why I can't see it there. That's annoying. It should be just there, because I set them all up to be in the same area of these anthology movies. Just type that one in, see if it finds something in there. But I'm sure the next one is actually 1971.
I think that might be Asylum.
Eh?
Is that Asylum? It's 1971.
I'm trying to find it on here. That's what I've got on here. I do apologise. This is us being professional. It really is probably about as professional as you get. Did you see someone saying that we should be doing a Chuckle Brothers tribute act?
No.
You not see that one? No. Yeah,
No.
someone put that forward as a suggestion.
Wow.
It was after that. Was it you that put that darn pun up?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
The world's longest sheep. Yes.
Yeah. To me, to you. That's it.
Yeah.
Bloody terrible. Absolutely atrocious.
It was horrible. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just trying to find it on here. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. You'll see it turn up. But it'll be. I'll send it to you. I'll send you the title. It's 1971.
Right.
I know that because we've got 171, 272, and then 73.
Right. So yeah, I was jumping way ahead. So yeah, next one is the 71 one.
Yeah, it's the 71 one, which I'll send you the name of. because I just can't. I'll say I've got a presentation coming up, so my brain's.
Oh, it's not the Torture Garden, is it? Or the house?
No, we don't have Torture Garden.
House that Dripped Blood.
That's later, isn't it? That's 74, isn't it?
No, it's not late. No, it's got John Pertwee in it.
I know that I can't find it on here. This is really annoying. Should be just a bloody folder on my list.
Right, let's see. So, right, 71, The House That Dripped Blood.
That would be The House That Dripped Blood then.
Right, then we've got Tales from the Crypt, then we've got Asylum, then we've got Vault of Horror, then we've got From Beyond the Grave.
So you did have the list written down then?
No, I've just gone onto Wikipedia.
Yeah, I don't think we haven't got all of them. There's a particular. I don't think I got Beyond. I might have Beyond Grave. We end with we end in the 80s.
Right. Yeah, but you're taking us into the Twilight Zone there, aren't you?
Yeah.
So is it Torture Garden next, or is it the house?
No, we haven't got Torture Garden.
Right.
I've got a folder with a load of these in. That's what it was. I got legally folder. Legal folder.
Legal folders. Yes, legal folders. So, House That Dripped Blood is the next one.
It will be then. It'll be The House That Dripped Blood.
Brilliant. Right. I shall go on to a.
Oh, I got it. Yeah. Yes, The House That Dripped Blood. Thank you. The House That Dripped Blood. Then Asylum. Then Tales from the Crypt. 1972. Vault of Horror, 1973. Oh, it is from Beyond the Grave, 1974. Creep Show, 1982. Twilight Zone, 1983.
Right. So, House That Dripped Blood.
Yeah. The legally obtained.
This is completely legal what I'm doing, and I'm buying it with money. Yes,
real cash money.
Yes,
that's digital form,
which is always the best way to do it.
Yes.
Yep, that's me convinced. Oh, right. So next one then. House That
Dripped Blood. There we go.
Brilliant stuff.
So anyone who made it this far, well done for sticking with us.
Yep.
On that last bit.
Yeah.
You're doing the synopsis for the next one.
There's this house.
You've got to try and describe it. The house that dripped blood.
It
was like his house, and there's all this blood dripping down.
Yeah. And John Pertwee's not happy, or whoever's in it. Yeah.
Yes. Isn't the house that bled, wasn't it? It was the first one of the Hammer House of Horror TV series.
Don't know.
That's something we're going to do. It only did one season. Hammer House of Horror TV series.
I remember the opening credits of it as well. Yeah.
So that's one that we will do. Right then. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It has been.
I'm looking forward to the rest of these now because just my favourite movies of all time. Yeah.
Yes. Very inspirational. It is. It's making synapses go ping.
The way synapses should. Yes.
Yes. If they don't ping, they pong.
Yes.
And you don't want your synapses ponging.
Yep. They don't mean a thing if they ain't got that ping.
It's been all appropriated with jazz again. Right. See you later, Ash.
Take care, mate.
Bye.